Hi, this is Howard. I'm going to tell you about a series of videos I'm going to be producing, which I hope you'll enjoy watching. I'm going to take you through my history of recording music, how I started, the equipment I used, and how I got to where I am now, where I'm recording my own solo materials and putting it out there. And David Bowie famously said, we live in the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times because it's so easy to record music these days with a computer. The worst of times because everybody's doing it, so that makes it difficult to get your music out there and stand out. But by sharing all my tips and tricks and a lot of things I've done in my recordings, I'm hoping they'll be interesting for you. I've watched a lot of videos myself from various other YouTubers and picked up some tips from them, but a lot of it I've picked up along the way in the last nearly 50 years I've been doing this. Interspersed with those videos, I'm going to do some reviews of all my gear, not just keyboards, although that's my main thing, so it'll be focused more on keyboards, but I'll also talk a little bit about some of the guitars I play and some other instruments. I'd like to start this video by telling you about the origins of my musical interests. I come from a musical family, and I started tinkering on the piano when I was about 3 or 4 years old. My parents had an old upright piano, pretty much you could call it a honky-tonk kind of piano. It wasn't an expensive one at that time. They later upgraded it to a better one made by Boyd's of London. There were a lot of London piano makers around that time. And then I went through the usual grades. My first piano teacher took me up to grade 6. She retired, and then my aunt taught me grade 6, 7 and 8. She was a fantastic teacher. I didn't get to grade 8 till I was 18, but I did learn a lot of other music along the way. I didn't just play the exam pieces and the sort of scales. I did a lot of practice of other kinds of music. I went through pretty much all of Chopin's waltzes, lots of music by Eric Satie, who I really liked, Debussy, who I totally love, some Mozart, etc., Bach, a lot of Bach. So I went through the usual classical upbringing. Then I hit the age of about 13, 14, and I discovered that there was some other kinds of music out there. And the first kind of music I discovered outside of classical was the Electric Light Orchestra, ELO. I became totally obsessed with them when I was about 13, 14. I bought one by one, I got all of their albums on LPs. You know, when you had these lovely LP-sized records that you could look at the back and see all the pictures and read all the lyrics, and it was just so much more visceral than the sort of the smaller CDs and what you now do with streaming. I got into sound recording, and so I started by using cassette decks, cassette recorders, which I've still got all of my original recordings that I made from way back when. I've got over 100 cassettes of albums that I recorded, all original music, all progressive rock. I think about 110 in total. And then I've got about a dozen reel-to-reels as well. So I started with cassettes, then I moved to reel-to-reel. So my first cassette recorder, my first foray into multi-track recording was with cassettes. My dad bought me a TIAC 3-track recorder. So you could record the first track on the left, the second track on the right, whilst listening back to the first track. And then you could put a middle track in as well, but then you had to send the outputs of the mix to another machine. My equipment at that time was a piano at home. I had a classical guitar, I think, and I had my dad had one of these home theatre organs. He had an Elka 707. I certainly learnt to play all the organ, bass pedals all around that time in my sort of early teens. But later I graduated to reel-to-reel. So my dad bought me a Bang & Olufsen reel-to-reel. It's the same one, coincidentally, that Jeff Lynne used from ELO for his early demos, and it allowed you to do an unlimited amount of bouncing tracks backwards and forwards, so that you could record one track, listen to that, record a second track, and that way you could sort of build up multi-track layers. The only trouble was, every time you bounced a track across, you'd lose a little bit of quality. But you could do it maybe 3 or 4 times without too much loss of quality, and you could alter the tape speed, so you could run the tape fast so that you spread the information over a larger amount of tape, and that way you got pretty decent quality on the recording. So I've got about a dozen tapes that I did with reel-to-reel recording of albums, which I haven't listened to for a long time. Most of those I did transfer to cassette tape. Briefly, I had a Revox A77. My dad bought that for me, and he later, I didn't get on with it so well. I think it was a bit complicated to use compared to the Bang & Olufsen. And he sold that to Sade, the recording artist who's famous for the song Smooth Operator. In the 1990s, I went into a music shop in Houston, Texas, and I saw a piece of software and hardware which really changed my complete approach to recording. I saw a package called Cakewalk. It was Cakewalk version 2. It was in the early 90s, and it was quite expensive at the time, and it had a piece of hardware that enabled you to connect it to any MIDI compatible keyboard or piano. I saw it demoed where you could play a piece on the piano and it came out on the screen, and as soon as I saw that, it blew me away, because up until that point I'd been writing all my music out on manuscript paper, all the classical stuff on manuscript paper, which took a long time. I'm not a very fast writer. I admire the classical composers who managed to get so much information down on manuscript paper, all the different parts. I can do it, but I'm slow. I suppose if you do it a lot you get a bit quicker, but I'm pretty slow. So to have something where you could play it on the piano, have it come out on the computer screen, correct any mistakes, and then print it out, that was fantastic. And initially I was doing that. I was printing out the music. I wasn't really playing it back and recording it. I was just using it to print my classical pieces that I'd written and record those later by live performance of the pieces that I then printed on manuscript. But pretty soon I realised you could do multi-track recording, and then I got into the multi-track recording. Please hit the like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell. See you next time.
Mr. Blue Sky, Mr. Blue Sky.